work, slept on the floor in the bathroom, and literally woke up in the next morning, pulled myself up onto the sink, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, this is not healthy. This is not the direction your life should be going. And I kind of went up to my desk and looked around and went, I don't want to be these people. I don't want to be the guy who doesn't see his wife and kids. I don't want to be the person who never ends up with someone. I don't want my life to be just stuck in this office for another 30 years. Hi. Thanks for having me on your podcast today.
No worries. Well, absolute pleasure to have you on, and really good, over these years of following your adventures to get down and have a chat about all the stuff.
Thank you very much for being one of the few that follows.
Well, as I say, you've done incredible stuff over the years, and it's just unbelievable, from your 17,000 kilometer run to cycling and all these adventures. I mean, how do you fill them in?
Well, yeah, it's quite... I've kind of recently been looking back at all the numbers, and it does kind of feel a bit mind-boggling that in the last 6 years I've done 32,000 kilometers of adventuring, all human-powered, and that doesn't include the mountains and stuff. But it's fun what we do, being adventurous people. So I try not to fix on the numbers too much. But
so how did it all start? How did you get into doing what you do now?
Oh, we're jumping straight in here. So I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. But I'm basically like most other people. You go to school, go to university, get a job in London or wherever it is, and that becomes your life. And I very much went down that path. And the story splits a little bit. So in my kind of non-work life, as a lot of people who do running and adventure and stuff, did the 5K run and the 10K run and then the half marathon and then the marathon, then the half Ironman, the 10K swim, always looking for that next thing that was going to give you that fix that you were looking for. And so that was going along in my private life. And then in my work life, I was just doing this job, which is a great job for anyone who wants to do financial communications in the city. But that really didn't fit with me. And I was just going through the motions. And, I was a graduate trainee, then became a account, whatever. And then in 2013 became a partner. And I was doing all these adventures on the side. But at work, I was kind of getting to that point where I was very dissatisfied with what I was doing. I wasn't getting much, I wasn't getting any sense of fulfillment from it. And I noticed that I was throwing myself at these endurance things. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was basically going to the pub and drinking too much. And both were kind of becoming too much of a kind of a crutch to kind of balance out my life. And I realized that sometimes I was going out at lunch, drinking or working out late at night. And that's just like, I'm just not very happy. And then there was one day I went out with some friends, and they went to, it was 4 a.m. and I was meant to be going back to Fulham, but my office was in the city. And I decided that going to the office in the city was better than going home because I was going to save time. So I went to work, slept on the floor in the bathroom, and literally woke up in the next morning, pulled myself up onto the sink, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, this is not healthy. This is not the direction your life should be going. And I kind of went up to my desk and looked around and went, I don't want to be these people. I don't want to be the guy who doesn't see his wife and kids. I don't want to be the person who never ends up with someone. I don't want my life to be just stuck in this office for another 30 years. And I thought back to the last time I felt some sort of fulfillment and personal success in my life. And that was this run I'd done in Vietnam in 2013, where it was a jungle marathon. It was meant to be 240 kilometers over 6 days, backpack on like Marathon des Sables. And it had been cancelled. But rather than let that cancelling stop the adventure, I decided I'd just fly out to Vietnam anyway, put the backpack on and just do what I said to everyone I would do, I just ran 240 kilometers down the side roads of Vietnam. And I can remember just feeling very content and happy at the end of that. And when I was slightly noticing this spiral at work, I thought back to that, and I went, that's what I need in my life. And that's when I made the decision to quit the job, the 9 to 5, the good salary, the London life, and go in probably about as far in the other direction as I could go. Which I literally, I think I quit my job in April, had 4 months notice, finished on the 28th of January, and on the 14th of August, I was standing in Vancouver with a baby stroller, looking south. A really long way to run.
I think it's kind of very interesting you say that, because you had a sort of build up from 10K to half marathon, which was exactly the same as me. I went sort of 10K, half marathon, ultra, and then a year later I was doing 32 marathons in 27 days. 27 marathons in 32 days. It's sort of that build up to try and sort of say, how far can you push yourself?
Yeah, I think also it's a little bit like an addiction.
Yeah.
Like it's a hit. You get a hit, and doing the same thing is not going to give you, unless you're absolutely focused on the number of how quickly you go, you're not going to get that hit, that sense of achievement. And so, yeah, I'm on a very slippery slope.
And so you were out in Vancouver in Canada, facing south. How did the sort of planning for that trip come about? And
so I'd obviously been thinking in my head, right, I need to quit. If I carry on in the life I'm in, I'm going to end up in a place I don't really want to be. So I thought I need to put passion at the forefront of what I do. And I was like, right, so I want it to be running, travel, adventure. And I can't just quit my career to go and do a marathon. This is going to have to be like a year-long endeavor. So I thought running a year, a bit of maths, 30 kilometers a day, that's 11,000 kilometers. So I started looking at a map and immediately went, right, I'm going to run around the world. And then I looked at the logistics of running around the world, cost of running around the world, the visas, and I realized that as a first-time adventure, that probably wasn't quite doable. And I looked going down through Africa, and it was the same sort of thing. And then I kind of looked over to America, and Vancouver to Buenos Aires just presented itself as quite an easy option compared to the other ones. It was 17,000 kilometers, 14 countries, but there was only 2 languages, English and Spanish. And with a British passport, you could enter every single country. And bizarrely, the bigger countries had the longer durations you could stay. So actually, you never needed a visa. You're basically running, the directions were run down the Pan American Highway, turn left in Chile, and then you'll be in Buenos Aires. So it was just kind of an easy option. And as a first big adventure, it kind of gave me that confidence that I'd be able to do that. So yeah, I was standing there, really long way to run, and just standing there with a baby stroller. And it was weird because I went to the center of Vancouver with the rush hour. So everyone was in their gray suits walking to work, and I was pushing my baby stroller in a yellow t-shirt. And I just felt that it just kind of, for me, it was symbolic of like, I'm kind of going a different direction now.
You're setting yourself free.
Yeah.
God. And I imagine, that took just over a year, was it?
So being a PR man, I always try to make it sound as good as possible. So it took me 367 running days to do, averaging about 46 kilometers a day. But my sister got engaged halfway through, so I don't do firsts and I don't do records. It's not my thing. So there was no way I was going to miss out on that. So I flew back for my sister's wedding. I obviously had to take rest days here and there, and days for injury, and packages arriving. The whole thing took about 14 months.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Got you. Oh, wow. And the people you met along the way, I have to say, to this day, I still count the American people as some of the friendliest and most hospitable people. Did you have the same sort of experience?
I sat on the airplane going across to North America, and I was like, I'm going to love the Canadians. I'm not sure about the Americans. I'm really not sure. And I remember just walking up to Canadians saying, this is what I'm going to do. And they'd be like, okay. And you're like, really? Okay. I remember crossing the border into America, went to a supermarket. A lady asked what I was doing. I told her, you got the tannoy out. Everyone started cheering. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then everywhere I went, exactly as you said, people would just stop and hand me money, give me food, take me in. And yeah, the kind of image I'd had in my head of Americans was not the reality I had when I was actually in the country.
Yeah, it was exactly the same with me. You sort of go across and you stop at a restaurant or a cafe, and someone just goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" And you'll say what you're doing, and they'll be like, "Oh God, okay," and it's really cool, whatever. And then they'll like buy your food without telling you. You'll bump into them at a petrol station or gas station, as they call it. And they'll just be like, here's $20, have a steak on me when you get to, for me, it was Nebraska. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Where's this coming from? And
Americans are, but you say that, I have done, as I said, 32,000 kilometers of adventuring around the world. And I still struggle to find a negative moment I've had with a human on those trips. And I don't know if it's because I'm mostly a solo adventurer, that people look at you, you're doing something physical, pushing yourself to the limit, and people feel like they want to either be part of it or they want to, or they can see that you're vulnerable in a way and want to protect you. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, people seem to be the same.
I think that's
a really nice unifying thing.
I think that's the advantage of going alone rather than with someone, is that you have that sense of vulnerability, and people are more encouraging to help you because you're alone and vulnerable. Whereas with someone, I think a lot of people look at you and just say, "Oh, they're fine." They're two together. So even if you're struggling, their immediate reaction would be, because there's two of them, I don't need to help, or I probably shouldn't help, or that.
Yeah.
And I think going alone actually is a huge asset to these adventures.
It's definitely my preferred way of traveling, like in the adventuring.
And so what were some of the sort of big highs you had from that trip? Because I imagine when you came back, you had a bit of TV coverage, a bit of newspaper articles. But I'm on the actual journey. Was there sort of moments along the way where you met people and you were just like, this is the craziest story?
Yeah, there's always, it's the things that you don't plan and the things that just happen. So I remember there was so when you're running like over a marathon day in, day out, and you kind of get into this perpetual motion that you just keep going. And sometimes it's very hard to stop because you just have this desire to progress. But sometimes when you do manage to wrench yourself out of that routine, you can have some crazy. I remember I was running in through California and there was a sign saying Soul Camp. And I was like, what the heck, Soul Camp? I ran past it and I remember talking to myself, which I started doing quite a lot of, like, no, go back and investigate, find out what it is. And it was a bunch of DJs from San Francisco who'd come up, hired a caravan park, and were having basically a rave for a weekend. And I managed to blag my way in because the guy was like trying to get $32 out of me. And then he asked me what I was doing. And he's like, what? Just go, get in there. And, that night I had a little Mexican lady coming up to me and giving me like a bowl of vodka gummy bears. I went to a pool party and I had hash brownies and just had the most amazingly weird weekend. And then the next day woke up and ran 50K to the next town. It was just like, how did that happen? And then just some of the kind of meeting, like I hitchhiked my way across the Sea of Cortez because I had to get from Baja to mainland. I didn't want to take a flight or a ferry because it just didn't sit well with what I was doing. And I ended up going on this kind of, for a week, across the Sea of Cortez with this amazing guy, actually, who had responded to a shout out I'd made for help. And I was raising money for a charity called CALM, which is the Campaign Against Living Miserably, male suicide. And that resonated with him because he'd been a firefighter at 9/11, and his job had been pulling the bodies of the firefighters out of the rubble. And he suffered from PTSD, and then as a result, actually tried to take his own life and was saved. And because he'd seen what I was doing and the charity I was working with, took me, and then we ended up having this mini adventure within my big adventure, which was fantastic. And then I think other highlights just come to things like trying to navigate your way around the Darien Gap between Ecuador and Colombia with a baby stroller, and trying your hardest to refuse to take any sort of kind of conventional travel. And then running across the Atacama Desert was insane. And then, I ran over the Andes, 4,800 meters, pushing my stroller. And you kind of I met cyclists, and they were like, what are you, like, this is difficult for us. Like, what are you doing? But at that point, you're 13 months in, 12 months in, you're the strongest you've ever been. And actually running over those things seems completely normal. But
that's unbelievable. And so once you had finished that journey, you came back to the UK?
So, yeah, I came back to the UK.
How did that feel?
So I actually think the giving up alcohol really helped. I'd heard from a lot of people about when you come back from a big adventure, then you're immediately going to be in a completely different environment, even though it's the one you're used to. But everyone's going to be wanting to take you out for drinks. Everyone's going to want to hear your stories. Everyone's going to be plying you with alcohol, and you're not really going to have anything else to do. So you have this, there's a trap of falling into the kind of guy who goes out every night. And so I made a decision not to drink for 9 months when I got back. And, I was within a month, I was cycling from Edinburgh down to London because my sister had taken my bike up to Edinburgh and had to get it back. And then I kind of went off and did the 3 Peaks challenge, but running it. So that was 700k with a backpack on. And then I went up to Scotland and did a 430 kilometer run. But what I kind of really tried to keep the kind of strength I had and plow it into new adventures, because I kind of felt poor and unemployed. So I thought, if you want this world that you want to enter into, you can't sit back on your laurels and rest. That you have to keep pushing. You have to show people that you're not a
one-trick pony,
a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
So, the one-trick pony thing as well came, because I did the 17,000 and I did a 700k, so the 3 Peaks challenge, and then the Scottish Isles. And then I realized that that's what I'd become. Like, I proved I could run a really long way by myself, and that was it. So I needed to diversify into other things. And that's why that was the beginning of starting new things. And the next thing was cycling across South America.
Okay. And so cycling across South America, was that from north to south or down the Andes?
No, so I never cycle toured before. So I spoke to a company, Fairlight, who gave me a Farron bike, and I bought some panniers, whacked it on. I cycled to Victoria, put my bike on the train, went to Gatwick, bought a box in the airport, undid my bike, flew it to Sao Paulo, and then rebuilt my bike in Sao Paulo airport at like 6 a.m. in the morning, and then cycled across Brazil, across into Paraguay, and then north up through the Chaco, and then to a place called Villamontes in Bolivia, which is the south of the Pyrenees, the low part of the Pyrenees, and then not Pyrenees, the Andes, and went over the Andes and down to Uni and then across the salt flat. It was about 3,700 kilometers in 28 days or something.
How did the two trips compare? Because you ran across South America and then you cycled it. What was the sort of feeling of going, you say, incredibly slow to just slow? Sorry.
I'm going to take offense that you say that my running is incredibly slow, but
I suddenly realized when I cycle, you're covering 100 miles a day. When you're running, you're covering 25 to 30 miles a day.
Yeah.
How did the two trips differ in terms of the sort of feelings towards them?
So when you're running, the huge distances, you are running from A to B, and you're wanting to get from A to B in the most direct way possible. And there's two things that does. One is that if there's a dangerous thing or anything like that, on a bike you go round it. If you're running, you go through it, and you just hope that everything's going to be all right. But also, it gives you, because of that kind of lack of ability to meander, I feel you get a much truer sense of a cross section of a country. You're basically slicing from the top to the bottom, north to south, or east to west, or whatever, of that country, and you get to see every single kind of geopolitical thing that hangs along that line, and that's a really beautiful thing. But on the flip side is, if you're running and you see a signpost saying the most beautiful lighthouse you've ever seen in your entire life, you're not going to run 11 miles to go and see it. But if you're on a bike, you will take that detour to go and see it. I also think that when you're running is such a solo thing that even when you arrive in places, you're a runner. If you're on a bike, there's much more of a touring community in bikes, that you become part of that touring community. So it's more, even though you're alone, you're still part of something bigger. When you're running, it's just you, because there are very few people do what you do. So no one really understands you. So,
and I suppose logistically, with all the equipment, what are the sort of main must-haves do you feel when doing these sort of trips?
Well, I've kind of spent a lot of time trying to reduce my kit down. So my camping stove and my tent and my sleeping bag and all that, and the liners. So the essentials of where do I sleep and how do I eat and how do I hydrate are pretty much the same for every single adventure I do, which I kind of like. So I've got a one-man tent, which is 600 grams. So if I'm going lightweight, I take that. Or if I'm being more leisurely, then I'll take my Hubba MSR two-man tent, so I can have a bit more luxury. But essentially, I just have a very lightweight kit selection I use for everything. And I'm learning that when first time I did a cycle tour, I had 2 panniers on the front, 2 panniers on the back. The bike was fully laden. Now I don't have any panniers on my bike. I've just got a saddlebag, a kind of frame bag, one on the handlebars, and a couple of extra bags here and there. So everything's about being light and efficient. So.
Yeah, I with running, I'm making sure it's as light as possible. With cycling, I'm a bit more, what's the word? I sometimes carry my laptop around, which sounds...
Yeah, I think when I ran the 3 Peaks, I think I took a tablet with me so I could watch TV in the evening.
Yeah. It's one of those things.
But how much do you run with when you have it on your back?
Just a small backpack, a sort of 20 litre or...
So when I'm doing like the long multi-day ones, I'm running with so when I ran across Iceland, I had a 44 litre backpack carrying 15 kilos. And, still able to do the 50, 60 Ks a day. I actually did a sub 4-hour marathon with it on, which I was quite happy about. But so I'm more of a believer in taking more stuff and having a more comfortable journey than going absolute bare minimum, because that's only good for when you're actually moving. When you stopped moving, which is more of the time, I want to be comfortable for that time.
Yeah.
I can endure pain longer when I'm running than
with cycling. I think it was in America where having my laptop, because I was blogging at the time, but also just now and again you get these sort of moments, and one of them was in Wyoming, and Wyoming's like in the middle of nowhere, and there it's very sort of sparsely populated. I think it's 200,000 for an area the size of the UK. Anyway, I was sort of cycling through and hadn't seen anything for about 50 miles. Suddenly I came across the Mormont Handcroft historical site. And it was the evening, and so it was, what's the word? So it was closing down at the time. And anyway, I sort of needed the loo. So I went into the loos, and I remember being there and being like, whoa, it has electricity. It has a sink. It has this. I mean, this is amazing. Anyway, I ended up staying the night in the Mormon's historical handcraft site. And I remember sitting down and watching, I think, Sacha Baron Cohen movie or something like Borat. And I just remember just thinking, like, at the time, I felt it was the lapse of luxury. But I imagine to anyone listening, sleeping in the loos of a public loo is just beyond a joke. You just think, God, that's disgusting. But because I've been so used to camping in like dirt and not having running water and no electricity, just one night with electricity and a basin was just like lapse of luxury for me.
Yeah, it's amazing how the little things in life become so much more cherished when you're out. But I actually sometimes rebel against, when I'm doing adventures in more developed countries, I kind of feel like I'm being
you're cheating,
a bit soft. It's just like I need to go. I like being places like Bolivia and Mongolia and just places that are a bit more real. Because I think quite a lot of what we have today is just makes us so everything's too easy.
Well, you know what they say, it's sort of human beings design things to become lazier and lazier. It's like stairs are too easy. We need an escalator to take us up.
Yeah.
Escalator's too difficult. What about if we get a lift?
And then soon we'll have our packages delivered by drones.
Well, I would say that's not far off.
No.
I think Amazon came out with the advert 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So
But that's why I live is in the middle of nowhere in the south of France.
So what you can tell Amazon, you can deliver to here, and they're like, what?
And I actually quite rely on Amazon, which is very sad, but
yeah. No, I know. It can be so easy. And in terms of your running, I mean, if you're running nearly every day for a year, you must have come into what sort of motivated you when times were really tough in terms of what was the sort of feeling or something in the back of your mind that sort of kept you going?
It's kind of different at all, like depending on what situation you're in. But I was talking about this with someone earlier, and I think there's quite often this misconception when people look at adventurers and they go, look at that guy, he's got the get up and go and run across a country, and look at him, he must be the happiest person in the world. And I actually think that quite often you look at adventures and you like the kind of psychologists would kind of look going, what's wrong with that person? What is the thing that's missing? And I kind of try and work it out and distill it and to convey it. But I kind of see myself like I am a happy person. I'm not in any way a sad or depressed person or anything like that. But I do think that what I do is I have a lot of self-doubt. I probably don't like myself that much. And I don't think I'm good enough. And I basically try and draw on all the negative stuff that's in me. And then I kind of put it through this internal processor, which turns it into a desire to prove to myself that I can do it. And I don't do, as I said, I don't do records. I don't do firsts. I try not to I have to talk about my adventures because it's what I do as a job, but I don't celebrate when I finish an adventure, which I probably should. It's all just to prove to me that I can do it. But I'm doing it in places I want to do it. I'm doing it for positive reasons. I'm doing it for passion. But when it gets tough, it's just like you need to prove to you that you can do this. So don't let yourself down. I'm never letting anyone else down. So it's just like, I just don't want to disappoint myself.
Yeah, I think there's a huge element of that in terms of, I mean, I suppose when I first got into it, it was very much that sort of trying to make a mark. It was trying to sort of, as you say, these sort of insecurities that one has in trying to sort of show that you are bigger and better or whatever it was. As I say, now it's sort of more for the love, but there's a sort of, sometimes when you putting yourself in such horrendous situations, people must ask the question of like, why would you ever endure that? But there's a part of me that I sort of feel by enduring it, it just means that later on in life, when something really bad happens out of my control, I can endure that better than than what I would if I couldn't endure this.
Yeah, I'm very similar to that. And I kind of look at it, and it's probably an analogy that lots of people use, but I look at like, this is me in the middle and this is what I think I can achieve. And every time I come up against anything that's really difficult and I push the circle out a little bit, the amount of all that extra space of new things I now therefore think I'm capable of doing. And I think that comes back to when you're talking about going bigger and bigger and bigger, So when you run over a mountain and you get to 4,800 meters, you're like, I did that. What can I do next? How can I push that? So it's almost now like I'm seeking that horrible place where everyone else is sitting there going, why would you do that? I'm doing it because I need that, because I need to be able to push the barrier further. I want to see what I'm capable of. Where are the boundaries? Because I spent so long living in this is what you do, this is how you live your life, and I want to expand it. But also I watch quite a lot of these other like groups who are sitting there going, you should quit your job and you should go doing adventures and you'll be happy if you do that. And I just hope that lots of people who buy into these communities do sometimes take a step back and think that to actually go and do these hardships is quite often a very lonely place with very little future security, no routine, and it can be a weird world to be in. So I think the people who can live with the structure of society and contributing positively to those around them and living in community, that is actually sometimes a good place to be.
I think what was it? Do you know Alistair Humphreys?
I think he's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely great guy. I remember, I think it was on his Instagram or his blog, he said he got a message from a guy who had sort of spoken to him for a sort of year, saying how he wanted to go on these grand adventures. And he had a kid and, a family or whatnot. And then about a year later, he saved up all this money and decided to cycle, across the Himalayas or somewhere like that. And he said after 2 weeks, he quit. And he said, I realized then and there that these big grand adventures, which I sort of was envious of people doing, they're not for me. I miss the comforts of home. I miss my family and the sort of connection that one has. And I'm actually happy just doing the sort of weekend or the week here. But these grand adventures they're really exciting and, I absolutely love them. But I can't recommend them to everyone. It's almost impossible to.
Yeah.
You have to decide whether that's the sort of life, as you say, with no routine, no financial security whatsoever. But you don't really do it for any reason other than the love of actually pushing yourself further and further.
And when the more you analyze it, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the more you analyze it, you realize that it's quite a selfish endeavor.
Yeah.
I'm doing something because I want to do it, and I do it on my terms to push myself as far as I can go. And so that's why I spend a lot of time when I'm not doing adventures trying to make videos about how to do adventures and kit to use and like sharing my adventure, because you can't just take and feel good about it. You have to give back to balance out the kind of life equation of being a good human being.
And
or striving
is
to
that
be.
why you started doing these vlogs on it?
The vlogs thing, so I've done lots of videos in the past. This just recent vlogs is because I just want to use it as a tool to actually push myself. So I've got an adventure planned for next year, which sadly I can't talk about, but there's a massive amount of preparation that needs to go into that and training. And, I want to film it the best I can. And what better way to do it than to make content and share it with people and get them to, I did one yesterday on, my daily workout, which is about 4 hours and burns 1,500 calories. But when I'm doing it, I'm watching the video and I can see the rolls of fat on me. And I'm like, wow, but by putting that video out there, I'm holding myself accountable. And I I'm going to have to keep going. And like the first 2 videos were just going on a hike, and then I'll go and do a run, and I'll do a cycle. And I just use it as a tool to hopefully help other people see what it's like to be an adventurer. Maybe teach people some stuff about my life. Maybe get people to tell me, come and help me. So it's just a way of opening myself up to people when I'm stuck alone in a house.
Yeah, of course. God. 4 hours, did you say?
Yeah, but that's taking it. So I'll do an hour and a bit walk in the morning. I'll do an hour of yoga, and I'll do an hour of strength training, and I'll do an hour on a bike or a run.
Well, you must be almost, and you're based quite near the mountains at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, so I went and did a nice 2-day hike over the mountains the other day, which was slightly more adventurous than I had initially planned. Like I got up to the Brecca, the Roland, and down the other side, no one had actually ventured down the other side, and I realized why when I got kind of waist deep in snow, trying to push my way down this quite dangerous, walking over like rivers that were underneath me, and but it was great fun. So hopefully more and more of that.
Yeah, I bet. And so in terms of these vlogs, are you sort of talking about your diet, your daily routine, your equipment? Is this the idea?
Yeah, it's going to be everything. So like that one was about it was about doing what I do, workout. Then I'll look at one looking at nutrition. I'll do some jokey ones like what's it like to go hiking in a kilt, being Scottish, can't tell, but and I'll do, there's a lot of deer around here, and I love going out and watching the deer and stuff. So I'll go out and film the deer and like share things that people back home might not be able to see at the moment. So it's just as I said, it's a variety. It's a way of getting me to do stuff that is constructive, especially when you're writing a book. Very easy to sit at your desk and then look up at 7:00 at night and realize you haven't been outside. So by putting a tool in place, it means I have to go and do stuff. I have to break up the sitting at the laptops.
Another question I wanted to ask was sort of about running and the sort of failures you've had along the way, because as you say, you started out small and you've progressed into this huge ultra marathon runner and adventurer.
I've never actually done an ultra marathon.
Have you not?
No.
An official one.
So I've run really long distances in, I think, when I did the Endure 24, where you do the laps of 5 miles. In 24 hours I did 80 something miles. So like that's 135k in 24 hours. I've done 78 kilometer days. I've run 400k races, but multi-stage races. I've never actually done an official ultra marathon, so it's on the list.
I think last year was the first official marathon that I'd ever run. and it was actually a lot harder than actually running and it's sort of a marathon as an adventurer or an ultra marathon, because you're sort of motivated by your time, whereas when you're doing it as the sort of adventure, you're sort of more motivated by what you see, and there's no sort of care. There's no sort of crowds.
When I got to Argentina, and as I told you, I needed to get to Buenos Aires for New Year's Eve, I was very much motivated by time, because that section I did 28 days straight in 40-degree heat, and I ran an average of 58k a day, bang in for 28 days. So that was being pushed by time, because I managed to arrive in Buenos Aires a day early. So
you must have been pretty chuffed with that.
I was pretty happy. Except I wasn't drinking, so I didn't really celebrate.
But I sort of know from experience that with running expeditions, in terms of either training or nutrition or something along the lines, has there ever, with these expeditions that you do, is there a time when you've failed, and sort of what have you learned in these years of doing this?
Right. So I failed. I've failed many times, but I've had 2 big failures in my life when it comes to running. And the first one was when I did the Cape Wrath Ultra in 2018. Yeah, 2018. And it's a 400k race. It's 8 days across Scotland, and it's weird because it's, in my eyes, it's a failure. I came third, but I ran the first 4 days running. I was in third place, and then I sprained my ankle. And then on day 5, I went out there, and I just couldn't let go of this. You're in third place, and I walked at the beginning of the day, and everyone, like literally the whole field, went past me, all saying, "Oh, it's so sad to see you like this," and like, "Son off." And then I found a pub on the side of the road, like just random hotel in the middle of Scotland. Stopped, had a pint, and just said, "No, this is not how this ends." And I went out there and I started running around, going, "Right, who's got painkillers?" And I found a doctor who gave me some cocodamol and diclofenac, and I ran for 4 days on a sprained ankle. And every evening I couldn't walk, and I had to put my leg up, and I couldn't. But I did it, and I got to the end, and I was like, I'm a hero. I finished that race, and then quickly learned that still living with it now. I failed because I should have pulled out that race the moment I sprained that ankle. And it's about knowing your limitations. And if you actually want to succeed for a long time, then you have to take little hits along that way. And then the second time was in the 2019 when I was backing up the Aconcagua and the everything together. Madagascar was the last one, and 2 weeks before I went, I was here and I went for a run along the back track, and I put my foot down a rabbit hole and twisted the other ankle, and I just couldn't even carry on. I had to turn around and limp back, and everyone was like, "You shouldn't go to Madagascar if you can't walk." And I was like, "No, I'm going." And I flew all the way there, and then I bought another flight to get to the north of Madagascar. Then I got all the way to the beginning with my 15-kilo backpack with 2,000 kilometers to go. I went for a run, and I couldn't even run without a backpack. And just stubbornness and just trying to prove a point to myself. And maybe at that point I'd been succeeded in everything that year. I was like, I can't fail. And I had to learn how to gracefully admit defeat and come back with my tail between my legs. But they're the kind of failures I look at. I haven't really had nothing else has really gone wrong. But those were the two lessons that stick with me. That, and don't do massive trail running expeditions with other people, because it doesn't work.
Yeah. So this is the sort of part of the show where we ask the same 5 questions to every person that comes on.
Yep.
And so the first one is, what's the one thing that you crave or miss from home? Or the weird thing, which people would be like, what?
I got two. I'm weird. Like, I don't miss that much. Like, I see that being at home is the bit I don't like. I like being on the adventures. I really miss Jaffa cakes. Like, Jaffa cakes are the one thing that I absolutely miss. And then just completely weirdly, I love a hot bubble bath with like candles. But you don't get that when you're adventuring. But I do miss it.
That's a big luxury to have while you're adventuring. I mean,
it is.
I mean, you could probably try and recreate it in a river if you must, but...
Yeah, I thought that when I was in Iceland I was going to get them, but I actually never found a hot spring when I was there. So
the next one is, what's your favorite adventure book?
I think the book that has, for me, inspired me the most was the Ben Fogle, James Cracknell, Rowing Across the Atlantic. I absolutely loved that book, and the way that you had the two people with the two different takes on everything, and how that kind of played out. And that was one of the books that really made me feel that I wanted to get into endurance, long distance kind of stuff.
Yeah, I went to a talk with Ben Fogle on it. It was absolutely fascinating, the sort of conflict that those two had together, but at the same time came out of it. As he said, one went to compete and the other one went to complete. And the two different mindsets clash massively.
Yeah.
As you probably know from the book.
Yeah. But fully admire them both.
Unbelievable. Did you have an inspirational figure growing up?
So I don't really have a single figure, because I wasn't really into adventure until I turned 34. It wasn't really a thing I was doing. But following on, Ben Fogle has been someone that I've looked at thinking, I want to have his life. I want to be able to do what he does. So that is kind of as a guiding thing. I'm not like all the people who go for the big runoff fines and all that kind of stuff. That's just not really, it's not really ever been part of my life. But what I kind of think I do is I look at all these people and I pick out attributes about them and I create my own character, which is this impossible person that I'm trying to be and I will never be, and I will always be let down that I'm never that person. But I like to take a little bit of everyone rather than just focus on one single person.
Yeah, I agree with that. As I say, growing up, I was a big sports fan, so mine were more sort of sporting stars rather than adventurers. And so the next one is, do you have a sort of favorite quote or motivational quote?
Yeah, so just before I did Running the Americas, I went to a pub with my friend and he pulled out his phone and he said, watch this. And it's Alan Watts. And it's, what would you do if money was no object?
Yeah, the 2-minute clip.
And that line just makes me remember why you're out there. You're not doing this for money. You're not doing this for anything. You're doing this because it's your desire, your passion. And that's why you should do it. And by just keeping that, everyone I speak to, I say, you have to watch this video. You have to listen to this. What would you do if money was no object? And that is just kind of how I try and live my life, which is quite easy when you're an adventurer because there isn't very much money. So I achieve it on a daily basis.
And so people listening to the show are probably keen to go on adventures or running adventures like you. What's the one thing you would recommend them to get them started?
If you were going to do it, if you really come from nothing and you want to get into adventuring, then I would pick a nice, simple route like the West Highland Way or something like that, and you'll use that as a training run. Like, no matter what you're doing in life, how big adventures, you still need training runs, training hikes, training cycles. So pick a nice route that you can start, and if it's too difficult for you, you can stop and then you can go back and restart and then carry on. So just by having and remember that no one else cares what you're doing or how you're doing or how you get off, because you get wrapped up when you're on an adventure. You think everyone's watching you. You realize that actually no one is watching you because they have their own lives to deal with and you're on your own. So don't let the idea that if you're trying to do something big and you have to stop and come back, that's not a failure. That's just you learning how to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, so. I agree with that. We were speaking on the podcast last time with Geordie Stewart, and we basically said, when the first time you break 100 miles cycling, or you break the first time you do a marathon, you just got to remember that no one cares. You're not going to break any records. You're not going to do it. It's just purely for your own accord. And while you might be there going, yes, you shouldn't push yourself based on what other people think. It should just be your sort of, what's the word? It's your trip, so make it yours.
Yeah.
Rather than I should carry on. I should do 120. I should do 150 or something like that, because otherwise people will think I'm being lazy or something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is to all walks of every part of life. Like I spent 12 years working in the city because I thought that's what my dad wanted me to do. And when I told him that, he said, "I never told you to work in the city. That was your own. You just manifested that." And I was like, "Oh crap!" It's like in everything in life, just do it because you want to do it, and that's why you're doing it.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. And so, what are you doing now, and how can people follow your adventures?
So I can't say when my next adventure will be, but it will be 5 months, 6 months long. It'll be in 2021. It's either going to be a really long one, or it's going to be a really long one in terms of distance, or a really long one in terms of time, depending on what COVID does. And at the moment, I'm just hunkering down, trying to get my book written, and trying to get as strong as I possibly can to be able to take on whatever the adventure will be in 2021. But I'm going to concentrate on putting content onto YouTube and Instagram, which is Jamie is running. So there's lots there already, and it's really, really cool if more people than my mum watch them. So,
well, definitely go check it out. And as you say, you started these daily vlogs or weekly vlogs, so
it'll be like 2-3 a week.
And I'd recommend everyone to go check it out. And
thank you very much.
Check out the mountains and the beautiful French countryside around you at the moment. Yeah, but I look forward to.
I'm going to enjoy what the countryside has to offer, and then all the wine and duck that has to offer as well.
Well, I look forward to following you on your next journey, and once you've finished that, come back on the show and tell us how it went.
Will do.
Well, that sounds great. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on today, and good luck in your future adventures.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to following whatever adventures you do, and meeting all the people you're going to be speaking to over the next few months.